Yes.
We're back to talking about Angela Bassett. Okay, here we are. Welcome to today's art stream, game stream. We're going to talk about a game design feature right now, and we're probably going to keep it pretty short. So, Erin, Sam, somebody, could you please keep us on basically a 30-minute leash? Let us know.
Can do.
Okay, thank you very much. Probably y'all haven't met Brandon. Brandon Simmons started with us 6 months ago. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay, so he comes from a long and glorious history in game design, but he's local, surprisingly. And so he's been working with us on a whole bunch of stuff. And I want to introduce him to this. Largely, this conversation comes down to game design questions, although obviously things like art and stuff is involved. And so he's likely to be a hostile witness in this conversation. Actually, it's been a lot of fun working with kind of a different input on this. You know, I don't have, Len, is I don't have camera control, but I can probably make that work. Anyways, so we want to talk about our scent system. Bottom line is the goal of this was to have something that was really kind of different. In this case, the idea that animals would smell the world a lot more than humans would, right? So Redwall, you've got all these critters kind of experiencing the world through their noses, and we wanted to have a way to reflect that. Other games have done scent, to my knowledge, what we've been able to find is a sort of like a hidden layer of information. So I think about Batman Detective Mode as an example of places where people have done scent before. Dog's Life did something similar. I think Ocarina, or was it Ocarina of Time? One of the Zelda games had a scent thing.
Twilight.
Is it Twilight Princess?
Yeah.
Has kind of a scent thing. But I think in all those cases, they're static elements by and large. And so they're sort of in fixed places. And so I get like sort of super vision, and all of a sudden I can see a new particle or a new piece of paint or something. But it's really just hidden information. We want to do something that was dynamic and different and also pervasive. So this is one of the things that we're talking about right now is what is the passive experience compared to the active experience, and we'll talk about that. But anyways, this was our goal, and we wrestled with this for a long time. But I'll kind of tell you what we came up with so far. But everyone know, like, this is a work in progress. We're trying to figure out how this looks is very much up in the air because it's a difficult problem to solve visually, but also like what's valuable, what's interesting, what's fun. High level view, what happens right now is smelly things emit particles. Particles are affected by wind, and wind brings particles wherever it brings them. And then as they get close to you, you experience those particles. So as an example, I'm going to walk over here to this apple, and as it gets within my view range, I can start to see the scents coming off of it. Now in this case, this is a scent that I already know. I know what an apple smells like. And so right now there's this notion that I see this little apple icon on each particle, and huzzah, right? I have a smelly thing. As I get closer, basically there's more particles, sort of indicates that I can smell it stronger.
And we need to say that these particles are like placeholder for right now.
Yeah, we don't know how this is going to look yet. We're working on this. But one thing that particles give us is they can look sort of whiffy and wafty like you would imagine from a scent, but also because they have these tails, they will tell me sort of accidentally where the wind is. Now in this case, there is no wind in this area, so they're sort of randomly bouncing around in a windless zone. But this becomes a lot more critical as wind moves up. So I'm going to interact with the apple, which opens the door, and now I start to see a new scent. Right now, this is an unknown scent. Blue tells me these are organic particles, where previously red is just associated with apple. Again, not sorry. You see a red particle coming through here too. A red particle is an unknown animal scent. So we have animal, vegetable, mineral, and sort of other is kind of how we're handling it. But the names, don't let the names throw you, because they're placeholders and they don't really matter. They're just a way to categorize things. But they're vaguely indicated by potential threat level. So an animal says this is a potential threat. So red, right? Duh. A vegetable, probably not a threat. So green is sort of like the safe smells. And then blue and yellow are in between. So in this case, there's something coming downwind. I don't know what it is. So as I approach, you can start to see that scent particles are visible regardless of a light. So I can see them in the dark. And the trails start to indicate the flow of air. So you see that they move around around things. And as I'm getting closer now, I see a new scent, the green particle, and I continue to move up, and pretty soon I can see that every object has 3 notes to its composition. So there's basically a high note, mid note, and low note. The low notes have the lowest rate of emission, but they last the longest. So I could smell a low note a long, long way away. Well, it depends on the object, but the longest. Where the high notes happen the most often, but they don't travel very far. So this right now is actually an onion, but I don't know onion. So I get this sort of mix of particles, and when I interact with it, onion moves from my unknown list to my known list, and the particles change. So right now, they're the white particles with the onion on the top. Before I go any farther, anything you want to add into that so far?
We're still playing around with like the color scheme as far as like identifying what level of granularity. So if it seemed a little confusing why that was the same color, it's just consider it work in progress.
Yeah, we got to kind of figure out how that works. Erin, now you're lurking. You seem like you have something to say.
To add to that, one of the issues we have right now is that identified smells are white, but so is our wind.
Yeah, so that doesn't work.
And so it's one of the things that we're aware of, and that we're working on how we want to solve that and make that so like you don't get those two things confused. Besides the fact that wind doesn't have icons in front of it, it's just like we're aware of some of the issues with the current display.
Yeah,
we're working on them.
I don't mind saying part of the conversation here is like what information is even useful.
Right.
So like we have the opportunity to share a ton of information here, but it's not all actually useful to the player, and so we could really overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're also showing everything you see here is in passive, whereas some of this information can be in active sense. So
yeah, we talk about active sense, and I think in the 2 rooms from now.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now this is passive, and like Brandon said, you would see something. We're not sure exactly what all the time. Regardless, this is sort of like this is the world you live in. This idea. So, anyways, let me keep going a little bit farther. And I know that we've seen an unknown animal scent around the bend here, and as we get closer, you're gonna see more of it. So here is now. By the way, here's a flag. What flags are right now? They're just placeholders for us to decide. This should tell you what where the wind direction is going. It should give you visual cues, so you're conscious of wind direction as a real factor. So, like in hunting, for example, you always want to approach from downwind. If you approach from upwind, the deer, the elk, the whatever, they'll smell you before you get close enough to do anything. So, wind is a big deal. You want to make sure that you're approaching your enemies from downwind. So in this case, you see this red scent coming through the bars. Scent particles deflect with geometry, but we also have just sort of shaders that can block wind or whatever else. So that becomes a part of the deal. You can see right through the shadow, there's someone up there walking around, and he's emitting these red particles. So as I go around a corner right now, my camera is not working. I'm going to come around here. What did I do? Oh, I might have to tweak some of this because right now we got in weird control mode here. Let me go back to mouse and keyboard. The controller is another one of our half controlled things right now.
You might be stuck. Yeah.
No, it's just the controller.
Chris, while
Yes.
we're in between things, there are a couple of questions regarding the notes.
Sure.
Kate Kev asked, is each note useful to the character?
Good question. We're not sure yet. And so right now, the purpose of the different notes is largely that the base note will always correspond to its actual nature. So it'll be an animal, vegetable, mineral, or other, so that you can kind of just at a glance know what's upwind from you. What'll happen is that it'll actually break down from 4 notes to 8 down to 16 as your nose gets better at distinguishing between different conversations. One of the things that Brandon and I were just talking about at lunch is what's the usefulness of knowing though between a musky scent and a fishy scent? Like, does that give me anything that I can actually do something with? And we haven't got there yet. So right now it's a system that we may actually simplify because if it's more information than is useful, what's the point? In this room, something I wanted to show you was how it's just an easier way to see that scents particles will move around geometry. So as you'll see as Albert here, you see as his scent moves around this barrier, the scent particles will move over it or through it and everything else. Just depends on how the wind bumps it. So wind is three-dimensional. The particles are three-dimensional. That said, that actually may be one of the things that we collapse. Is like keeping scent, for example, to the ground plane or near it might actually reduce the visual noise. It's a thought. We're not sure what to do with it.
The other thing that someone asked, which I can answer this one, is that yes, when we're talking about notes, that's what the particles are. Notes are another word that we're using for particles.
Yeah.
In this particular scenario.
Okay.
And in terms of explaining it, we could always switch over to the graph because that's an easier way to display the graph.
Yeah, I'm going to get that probably towards the last end
That's
as we build up. I will mention that the terminology actually comes from the perfume industry, who talks about notes. So I just learned Albert scent. So now how we smell Albert is these little flying ghost Albert faces, which reminds me of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But so known sense, unknown sense is how this goes. Okay, I think I'm moving into this next scene. Is going to introduce active scent, and so I think it's Q.
It's cute.
Yeah.
Okay, when I go into active scent, one, I can't move, and I get information that I didn't otherwise have. I can see a lot farther, so or I can smell a lot farther, I suppose. I go from, I think right now it's a 10-meter radius in passive scent to a 30-meter in active. You also start to see the wind around me, as well as you'll see the bright red dots. Those are actually footprints from someone who was here ahead of me. Before going any farther, this is a place where I think that Brandon has had the most interesting thoughts on what do we get with active mode, what's meaningful, what's useful, what's fun, especially in a game that features stealth.
Right. So the question is, how do we make active mode? How does it have value? And the question is like, it's a balance of how much information we put in passive versus stopping. And so there's a trade-off mechanic that we haven't actually implemented, but going into active sense should have some kind of cost, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's like a cooldown or accumulation, a decrease of something that you have. What's also missing here is a screen overlay filter and the FOV changes. So the player definitely knows this is a very different mode they're entering.
Yeah.
An information gathering mode. So there's a lot more things that we can do in this mode that's acceptable because it's based on player choice.
Yeah, and I think right now the notion is that active mode, it represents you're focusing your senses, you're taking the time, and so you can't move quickly. Right now you can sneak in active mode, although maybe you have to stop. And this may be more than just scent. We may make this mode give you additional information. I don't know what that would be, but maybe your ears perk up. So maybe it's sort of all of your senses get
your FOV changes.
Yeah,
your audio sensory expands too.
So we're tinkering with that idea. And get me out of active mode. You're turning around. Do you have a question?
Nova has a question.
Hey, Nova.
Would it be possible to perhaps choose a scent focus that would be something like the Sheikah sensor on Breath of the Wild? Basically choose what to focus on, and that way you have a way to track specific things.
That's interesting.
It's one of the ideas, I think. So in your journal, scents that you know basically become listed. And I kind of like the idea that I could turn scents on or off selectively, which would be one way for the player to control how much noise they get. Mm-hmm. It sort of give them a lot more choice. I like that idea. It's not in place yet, but I think it's a good idea.
It's a really interesting idea, but it also has there's a challenge with the inputs and how you interact with it. What we don't want to do is go down a path where you're in the UI dragging filters and stuff to isolate particle effects.
Yeah.
We want to try to keep it as elegant and organic as possible.
I agree. Okay, so the purpose in this particular room is to use your active mode to follow the footprints. So they tell you which of these different paths is the right one, right? In this case, I go a little bit farther. I can do active mode again. There's the footprints. We have to figure out kind of how long those things last. Footprints go around, keep going, and through here, I will find that Liam is walking around. Where is he? Over here. There he is. Okay. And so in active mode, I can see him leaving footprints where he walks. I can see the path he's been on because he walks around. And of course, I can see his smell. And as my partner, he's a known scent automatically. So, ta-da! Liam. This kind of comes to the last part of this thing, is of course enemies, right? So enemies become a big deal. Kind of an earlier version of this, we also included a bit of the stealth mechanic. But here we just decided to focus on the smell. So what we've got up here is basically a sleeping rat. I can smell him. You can see that the particles from his scent will go through the bars, just again, depending on wind direction. And the change in the texture on the bottom is basically his area of awareness, so to speak. So as long as I sneak up on him, he can't get me. And remember, I'm downwind right now, as indicated by the particles. And so I can smell him, but he can't smell me. Now, if I go around, it'll be the opposite. And he'll catch my scent, and he'll catch me. So what I have to do is I have to, in this case, come around the bars. And I think we turned off the sound. So in this case, as I come closer to here, we get an indication from active mode of where the wind is going. And it's all coming from this vent. So this idea that wind becomes something you can manipulate. In this case, there's a switch over here. That if I switch the vent, now I block the airflow, and now it's okay. Am I allowed to switch it back? I never even tried that. No, we didn't make it's a one-way deal. Okay, that's fine. So the other thing that we show here as an example is that this is a barrel that if I climb into it, then it actually covers me in flour, and it disguises my scent for a while. Right now, it's just it works, but we don't show anything. And this is gonna be hard because my camera still is disabled in this view. So right now, remember this: the rat is below me, but out of camera, and I'm just gonna have to eyeball this. And because the wind is gone, it's okay. Open slot, and that'd be the kind of a puzzle that you might solve with changing wind direction. And I think that's sort of the end of the lab at the moment. We're going to be adding some additional features in here, but that gets me to this point. Where do you want to start? Let me go here. I'm going to quit to desktop and show a vision here. Okay, so let me go down to the kind of the next layer. In the way it's set up right now is that there are 16 sort of root scents, and they're categorized in kind of four big categories. And depending on how good a character's nose is, they can distinguish various levels of scent. So at the most sensitive nose can distinguish all 16 colors, but at this middle side, this is like a level 2 nose. They can't tell between, what do we got here, briny and mineral. They can't tell the difference between those two, so they just sort of assume they're both mineral. Same here. So there's this sort of cascade of lowered sensitivity. And at the mouse level, who they don't have the best noses in the world, they're down here. They really only get four colors: red, blue, green, and yellow. At core sense. They can't see that? Hey, Lenny. For somebody that can't see the screen right now.
Oh, yeah, because it's not. Hit F4.
Well, at least that shows it. At least I see it on your window there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that appears to work. So I think it'll be just a second while it shows up, and now Sammy sees it. Okay, we're back online. So anyways, the way that this works out right now is that scents sort of collapse depending on how sensitive your nose is. But someone asked a minute ago, like, is it really important to see all 16 colors? And the short answer is right now we haven't worked that out. And perhaps no. Perhaps this is over-designed at the moment, and we may dial back from it. You also see a bright ring and a dark ring. There's an additional possibility for every scent to be sort of fresh and crisp, or kind of rotten and old, which again may give us meaningful information or not. So that's the way that's set up right now. We talked about active scent gives you a better nose and lets you see farther. But I think at the lowest thing right now, from a presentation perspective, I think Erin would say, like, the hardest thing here is how do we make this that gives you information that's useful, that's not sort of overwhelming, which is something that Brandon's spoken to, is like, it'd be really easy to just cover the whole screen in scent particles, and that's no fun. because we're trying to figure out exactly what is useful. How do we design puzzles around this? We have some good ideas, but bottom line is this is the core idea that we're working on right now. We do think it's really interesting. We think it's different. It's something that no one else, to our knowledge, has done before. I think on the Discord channel, someone mentioned a wolf game. What was that called? Wolf Pack or something?
I can't remember.
There was a game on Steam that was like a wolf simulator. And to at least from what I could tell without buying the game, is that the scent mode in that was closer to the other games that were static. That was like a static layer of stuff. And I think what's interesting about this is the dynamic part of it. That these things are moving around the level, and where you encounter them is not just sort of like hidden paint. It's something else. And we're trying to find ways where this gets. When you think about ways that this could stretch out, is like you start to learn that one individual smells different from another individual, which might lead you to understand that this object, belongs to Sophia instead of Albert. And so the idea that this could get really granular, I think could be really fun. And this ties directly into food as well, because taste and scent are very closely related. And I think I've tried to probably explain it as well as I could, but then we're up to any open questions either from Brandon or Erin or the audience, if there's anything to say. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty short presentation today.
I saw someone say cooking puzzles using scent.
Cooking puzzles would be fantastic. So maybe that's one of the places where I was like, okay, if this system is interesting, what do we do with it, and how can we make it? How can we make it fun? And we have some ideas, but I think we need more.
Well, if it also it helps you make better choices and decisions about how you want to pursue collecting resources, then it's of value, right?
Right.
So that ties into the whole cooking thing. If I'm tracking down ingredients, right? If I don't have to guess, if I take the time to actually learn the scent, then it becomes easier down the road for me to collect that.
Yeah.
Nova gave us the name. It's called Wolf Quest.
Wolf Quest. That's that was the game.
And then someone asked, would it be possible to turn off the scent, like if you don't want to see it at all?
That's a good question.
I suppose I wouldn't be against that. So it'd just be a setting. Although I'm curious, what's the nature of the question? Why do you? Because we do plan to have that be a part of how you explore the game. I suppose you could turn it off the same way you could turn sound off.
They said for free play mode, if there is.
For free play?
I suppose. I'm not against that. One question I wanted to speak to, because it's come up before, is what about this system with people who are colorblind? Short answer is I think we've got to solve for that in that we can allow for these actually the nature of the color could probably be adjustable even on a case-by-case basis if we wanted to do that. And so we have some other ways to make this information available for folks who don't have say red-green patterns. So we have other ways to do that. We've already started to talk about it. It's not likely to be the default though. Like I think that the idea is like vibrant colors that really help for the audience that can see them. But we just want to make sure there's a fallback to something that is still useful if that's harder to see. So we've worked on that. We're aware of it. It'll be in here. I just don't want to make that the starting point for the conversation.
Yep.
That sound fair?
Yep.
Okay. I'm trying to think about if that's as an overview. We just wanted to go over this. Like the truth is, for me, this is a system that I think we've been brainstorming for 2 years, and it had a lot of technical problems. And right now, I think we finally have something that I think is workable. And now it's an implementation question. How does this become interesting and useful? And we're exploring something. It feels like it's uncharted territory. Mm-hmm. It feels like something that every time we turn around, we're like, well, if it does this, what about that? And how does that influence how much visual information do I have? Yeah,
I mean, most stealth action games, you have to basically contend with sight and sound.
Yeah.
Right? We're adding another layer of complexity, so our puzzles can just get really.
And I think one of the questions you and I started talking about is like, if we add scent, have we just made it much more complex? And if so, maybe we should nerf or take away something else so that we make it a trade. Although then it's weird. Like if sight, for example, doesn't matter to a rat, that just gets weird. Mm-hmm. Or sound. What are they all deaf? It doesn't make any sense. So it's It probably is a question of balance, right?
Right.
And I think that's what we wanted to share today. I know it's brief, but we're in the middle of trying to get the catacombs ready, and we're going to workshop at a level. So forgive us for just being brief, but unless there's questions, I think that we'll call it good.
Someone asked on the game design side of it, Does more particles mean that the performance runs slower?
You know, the particle systems are really light, and so from a performance perspective, we could pack this thing with a lot of particles, and it's not a big deal because the emitters are not emitting like thousands of particles; they're emitting a couple. And so even in a noisy scent environment, you're looking at maybe 100 particles total. So that's not a lot. So it's not really a performance.
Yeah, it's not like they're all like there's LOD in there to manage some of that. If most of the particle generation happens in active mode, we're already controlling like that view distance and everything.
Yeah.
So we have a lot more freedom with what we can display in that mode.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, but it's not performance heavy. And then we've been playing with these different things that simulate wind, and so there's a couple interacting systems here that are all up for grabs. But none of them are expensive. Like there's stuff at the front end, like with Megaflow, for example, you bake this wind map into the level early. But once it's baked, it's sort of just there, and it provides vector data for the particles. And otherwise, it's not a heavy load.
Yep.
How far away can you sense different scents?
So
Currently?
okay, so maybe I want to make sure I answer the question two ways. I perceive scents that come within a radius of myself. So once they are within, I think in passive mode, about 10 meters, I see their particle, it fades in, it goes by me, and it fades out. So that might be one answer to your question. But you also might be asking how far downwind will a particle travel? And that's dependent on the particles. So some things the particles last a long time, and they will go as far downwind as that brings them. So as an example, like a campfire, you might be able to smell that from the very end of Old Moss Creek all the way to the beginning. So the particle could travel that far, but you only see it when it gets to you. So I think I'm trying to answer the question from both sides, depending on what they meant.
Nova asked, "What scent are you?"
No, she wants to know how you smell.
Sort of like a soapy musky, I think right now is the right answer.
But she also might be asking the question, can you visualize your own scent?
Oh, not me particularly.
She said, what color on the scent wheel are you? But we're just summing it up. It's basically, she just wants to
I
know
vote pungent.
Pungent, thank you very much. Okay, so the character, which is not me, we wanted to make sure that you're not sort of like constantly smelling yourself, because that would just get really, it's just noisy, it's extra information. So in active mode, you can see your own scent, but I think right now it's a white scent because it's like any other known scent.
Yeah.
But that helps you know, like, where's the wind bringing my own scent. So it's information that you only get in active mode. We may make that scent stand out just so that you can tell it from other things. But right now, just treat it as any other known scent. Okay. So thank you very much for a brief one. And we are expecting to have another update here soon. I would say within the week, maybe shorter. And it will have some new things, but we'll talk about that in the What's New, What's Next. And thanks for welcoming Brandon. And John says that we should play Spin Tires next week, which is a ridiculously fun game when it's all about going slow. And I had a lot of fun. In fact, I bought it for myself just to keep playing it. Like, it's a whole mud womping game. That's just cool. So I enjoyed it.
And then next time we play, we'll have 4 cameras on YouTube, so you guys can cycle through each person, so you can see when I'm a troll to people.
Yeah, because you want to see, instead of just me stuck in the mud all day long, we can see other people. But I've got better at it. I've been practicing. Okay, thanks very much, and catch you all next time.